were talking about this word identity. We were talking about what does it mean to actually have the question answered, who are you? And we talked about how that sole identity as a Christian comes from the basis of who God says that we are. And so after knowing that, after acknowledging our place with God and our status and where we lie in the relationship with God, we move into this next spot where we're going to be looking at over this next bit of talking about this question, what is religion? Because with religion comes a lot of stuff. I mean, you get a lot of different moral stuff, you get a lot of spiritual stuff, and then sometimes we're kind of like, how in the world do those things combine into one thing? And so then we just need to talk about it. Sometimes we just need to talk about that stuff. So this morning, where we're going to be in is a really well-known psalm. It's Psalm 23, and so we're going to read it together before we jump in. So it'll be behind me on the screen. If you want to read it in a Bible or on your phone, you're more than welcome. But let's read this together. Psalm 23, it says this. The Lord is my shepherd, and I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures, and he leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. And even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me. In the presence of my enemies, you anoint my head with oil, and my cup overflows. Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So I'm going to ask a question this morning. What makes a really good movie? What aspect of movies make it just like something that just rises to the top of, yeah, that was worth giving my money and my time to? Is it the acting? Is it the plot development? Is it the scenery or the CGI or the effects? And I think there's one piece of movies that without this one thing, the rest just completely falls flat, and that's the soundtrack, right? Like what would Star Wars be without John Williams? How would we get excited about Indiana Jones without that classic opener or him running through the tunnel with a boulder coming behind him with fast violin sounds going, right? What would that scene be? Or Pirates of the Caribbean, right? Hans Zimmer. What would that movie be without that guy? I mean, seriously, the majesticness of those scenes of those boats sailing through the oceans, and you've got these amazing soundtrack behind it. And so there's this point where a soundtrack adds this emotional level, this like different perspective that really makes a scene to the height of its capability. And without a good soundtrack, I mean, it just kind of make or breaks the movie, right? So what's funny, and as I was thinking about this, is that in life, we do the same thing with music, right? We put soundtracks to our life all the time. Like let's talk about weddings, right? If you go to a wedding these days, what's the soundtrack of the wedding, right? It's dance time, it's upbeat. You might hear some Earth, Wind, and Fire going on, September coming on in. Like you might hear this dancing things, or if we're walking through a tough time, right? We might play some songs that really strike through the heart just to kind of get us in those feeling moments. Or if it's a summer day and we're driving down the road and we got the windows down, what's going to be blaring, right? Some fun driving music. Everybody's got that fun driving music, right? You've got these playlists. I mean, we organize songs and playlists on our streaming platforms specifically for events. Like, oh, we're going to a dinner party and we've got these 15 songs. So we understand the exact same thing. We do it with life all the time, and we find these different songs that are going to strike the right emotion at the right time in the right context. And then there's this other side to music. Like let's take the wedding for example. Have you ever been to a wedding and it's like time to dance and the DJ doesn't just quite understand the room? Right, and he starts playing some songs, and you're just kind of like, all right, Jerry, come on, like let's get some more upbeat stuff going on. Have you ever been in a spot where the music doesn't fit the context? And then it's just kind of like, well, this just seems completely out of whack. I'm feeling one thing when I'm supposed to be feeling another. And all of that, as I was thinking through this week, that's just kind of life. And so the 23rd Psalm of what we're jumping into today is we're looking at this statement, is that in life, you don't always get to choose the music that plays. You don't always get to choose the music that plays. But you do get to choose how to dance to it, right? You don't get to choose the song, but you get to choose how you move to it. Let me say it in a different sense. In life, you don't get to choose what circumstances happen all the time. But you do get to choose how to respond to it. You do get to choose how to respond to it. And so, as I was saying, we're going to be talking and unpacking what this word religion means. And so the series that we're in, we named it REAL-igion. Because we really need, in understanding true Christianity, we really need to understand that this idea that religion, that the church has issued in community, is totally different than the Christianity we see Jesus and the first disciples talking about and living. You see, when you hear the word religion, you usually hear like the basic definition, right? It's just a set of moral law or like a moral code or like some do's and don'ts. And then you hear the Bible and you're like, all right, the Bible's just going to be this layout of like, all right, here's life, here's how to live, here's what you don't do, here's what you do. A little joke for you right there. Here's what you do. And if you follow these all, then then it dictates where you go in the afterlife. And so that's religion that we can all understand. But you see, Judaism and Christianity in the Bible talks about something totally different. You see, religion is going to say, hey, this is the way of life that you need to live. You see, Christianity, who follows a God who is intimately invested in the very finite details of the human life. You see, Christianity cares more about the creator of the life than the actual way of the life. And so if we're going to understand what it means to be a true church and to be true Christians in a time that is so filled with here's what you do and don't do, try and be a good person and hope for the best at the end, I think the more we talk about it this month, we're going to be able to walk out of here with a better sense of God, with a better sense of what this whole life and relationship actually looks like, and what does God actually expect of my life as a Christian. And so if you're in here and you don't fully believe in the whole Jesus thing and you haven't given your life, that's okay. I really want to encourage you to just kind of listen to like what's the expectations of Christianity in the real sense versus some of the things that you might have heard. And so I think that the psalm that we just read is really, really going to pack a punch because it talks about how to react when life just does not go according to where we're going. And so these next 4 weeks, we're going to be unpacking these 4 sentences that start like this. When you love Jesus, but. When you love Jesus, but. And so this morning, we're talking about when you love Jesus, but you still need control. And I know all of us in here, there's that point in our heart that just happened that was like, oof. Because that's a message all of us need to understand. And I think how David is going to unpack what he's saying here in this psalm of praise, I think it really has vast implications. So what I want to do for our time remaining left, I just want to kind of break down the 23rd psalm. And then the last part, I just want to say, hey, what in the world does this have to do with our lives? So that's where we're headed this morning. So let's jump in. Are we good? We good? All right, let's do it. So we get into the 23rd Psalm. So right off the bat, when we were reading this, how does it feel? How does it feel? Is David in a good place or is he in a bad place? Good place, bad place. I mean, yeah. It kind of reads both ways when you look at it. It kind of reads like he's in a bad place and he's trying to like pull himself into a good place, or David's in a good place and he just came out of the bad stuff, and he's writing it from this perspective of, hey, I know who God is. And so regardless of where David is in this specific thing, it has the feel that something happened and David is moving towards God in a different way. Some kind of circumstance is adding fear and is adding doubt and curiosity to David, but somehow David's mind and his heart are going to shift towards God, who's the opposite. And so when you read this, you kind of get this like weird peaceful sense to it, right? Like the Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures and leads me beside still waters. And so the heart of this psalm is that David is moving his mind and his heart towards God. And the result of that is going to be peace from whatever in the world is going on. And so this first statement, the Lord is my shepherd. I shall not be in want. Or in some of our translations, it's like, I shall not need, or I shall not be lacking of anything. And this statement specifically for David really hits home. If you remember, when we first meet David in the scriptures, we see him in 1 Samuel, and Samuel is walking through the land of Israel, and he's trying to find the next king. And so he goes to the town of Bethlehem, and he goes to this guy's house named Jesse. And he says, hey, I believe God led me here to pick the next king who's going to be one of your sons. And so Jesse's like, oh, here's all my boys. And so he leads 11 of his sons into the room, and Samuel's like, no, 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 no. I really like you, but no, no, no. And then God's like, none of these people are going to be the next king. And so Samuel's like, okay, well then who, like, Jesse, do you have any more sons? And so Jesse's like, I mean, yeah, there's David, but like, David's out in the field right now tending to the herd. And Samuel's like, yes, call him in. And so when Samuel meets David, it's kind of like this Holy Grail moment where it's like, oh. And then Samuel's like, yes, that's the guy. And so you get this scene where the first aspect we see of David is doing what? He's shepherding. And so this analogy is hitting home. Maybe for us, I don't know how many of us are walking around with herds of sheep each day in and out, but this analogy for David hits way more home than it does for us. And so David, acknowledging that God is his shepherd, is much more than we think it is. So let's take, for example, what's the responsibilities of a shepherd, right? Sometimes it's guiding the sheep. Sometimes it's protecting the sheep from predators. Sometimes it's moving sheep into a new pasture or providing for them. Or sometimes it's grooming them or caring for them or going out and finding the lost ones. Or sometimes it's disciplining them. And sometimes it's just, well, when you think about it, it kind of sounds like the entire existence of the sheep is wrapped up in this one person. And here's the interesting thing. When we read this statement, we hear, the Lord is my shepherd. And we might say like, yeah, that's really poetic. You know, in times of need, the Lord guides me. Or in times in need, he protects me. And David saying this statement is way bigger than that. David sitting here is saying, I'm a sheep, and my entire life depends on this one person. Because for us, it's like, oh yeah, sometimes I'm really confused and I'll start praying to God and I'll ask for guidance. Or sometimes it's all about, oh, I'm feeling scared, God, or doubtful, and I need you to come through in these ways. But then we look for these one or two little aspects, and then the other side of it's just like, all right, I need you to focus on this one thing, God, and I'm good with the rest. And when we go about our lives and we go continually just on and on about like, I just need help right here, but I'm good. I'm good in every single other area of my life. And David is going to say, no, my entire existence, the only reason I'm even able to live right now is because God protects me. He guides me. He cares for me. He grooms me. He leads me back. He disciplines me. To the point where David's going to say, so much that I lack nothing. And then he's going to keep going, and he's going to say, he makes me lie down in green pastures, and he leads me beside still waters. Did you catch the interesting word in that? He what? He makes me lie down in green pastures. You ever have God call like a timeout in your life real quick? You ever have those moments? And it's not always that God is bringing in doom and disaster or God will do this and whatnot. He works with a lot of things, and he at times might actually cause some of those things for our benefits, right? You ever have God pull a big time out like, hey, you're going down that direction, and I know you're praying, so here's a broken leg. Let's sit on the couch for 2 months and let's like sit. And you ever have those moments where in hindsight you're just like, okay, that was totally God, and I know that I needed that. He makes me lie down in green pastures. Sometimes God's got to just say stop. As a sheep, we're always running, we're always going, we're mindlessly going about things, but God is going to say, hey, in the chaos, in the hustle and bustle, sometimes we just got to hit pause and we just got to sit here for a little bit. Still waters and green pastures. And I love this statement because in the first thing, David is going to say, hey, God has everything that I need. And in the second statement, he's going to say, God knows when and how I need those things. The sheep is completely dependent on the shepherd to the point where we can't get our own things. And two, we don't even know when we need and how we need those things. And so God, as the shepherd, is going to jurisdict and he's going to direct every facet of our lives. And then as we're in those green pastures, his next sentence is, he's going to guide me in the right paths. As we're going through life, as we're doubting, as we're getting flooded with all of life, no matter what circumstance, God's going to say, remember who I am. Let's take a time out, and then let's redirect. Let's do some course correction. And he's going to lead us in the right ways. He's going to lead us in the right paths. For what? For his name's sake. That we and others might know him just a little bit more. And so what that is going to produce is this point where David is going to be able to say, even when I'm walking through the toughest of the tough, even when I walk through the valley where death is all around me, waiting to pull me into it, the shadows and the fear, I walk through unfazed, I walked through unspooked, and I can walk through with an assurance that God is absolutely right next to me. How many times do we walk into those spots and we just lose it? Like, where are you, God? Like, what in the world's happening? I need you to fix this. I need you to do this. You're not speaking. You're not showing up. Well, what are the steps before that? Acknowledging, did we even acknowledge who God is? Did we even sit and for a moment let God lead us into those spots of peace so that we might be able to continue walking without any fear? And so there's this beautiful kind of lead up. It's all about locking eyes and understanding who God is as we walk, which produces the lack of fear. So, do we spend enough time with God? Do we know him and rely on him as our shepherd for everything, not just these one or two things? Everything about life revolves around God. There was, my wife and I, we just got a kitten. And the kitten was super sick in like the first week. And so the vet gave us medicine. And so we're trying to pump medicine into this cat. And this cat's like, please, for the love of God, stop. Like, this is just awful. And so we feel awful every time we have to give medicine. And she'll run around the house and we have to catch her and force medicine into her. But it's just those moments where it's just look, we have what you need. We have what you need. And we know that you need this in order to get better. It's like giving a kid medicine, right? It's like, oh, it tastes terrible. I don't want to. And at times, it's like, as the parent, it's like, hey, I know you need this. I have it, and I know when and how it needs to happen so that they can continue walking. And some point, we realize, okay, God does care. So I can continue walking and knowing that he's with me in everything. And so the interesting thing about this psalm is that we usually stop there, right? Valley of shadow of death, I'll fear no evil, God's with me. Yeah. But there's 2 more verses left. And we usually stop there because then the next little bit's kind of like something about a table and some oil and then a cup overflowing, like turn off the faucet kind of thing. And then he says some spiritual stuff, and then we're kind of just like, I don't get it. So we kind of just stop, right? You ever hit those moments in the Bible where it's the metaphor is just God's like a tree of Lebanon. I have no idea where Lebanon is, so I'm just going to kind of tune that part out. But I think this is one of my favorite parts of this psalm because the imagery here, yeah, sure, we might not understand it, but David understands this point. So let me paint this picture for you real quick, right? Okay, so in either high celebratory moments or very low, I don't know what's going on, I feel really bad moments. What is one common activity that makes every single one of those absolutely better? Food, right? Food. When it's a birthday or a wedding or some kind of celebration, what's the thing that we do? We go out to eat. We have a great meal and we celebrate around with people. Or when I'm low and I'm down, what's better than coming home, opening the fridge and seeing that your favorite thing's in there, or that you've still got just enough ice cream to kind of make the rest of the 9 to 5 just kind of fade out for a little bit, right? So David's first thing, you prepare a table for me in the presence of my enemies. How comforting is it when life's going on, whether it's great and it's busy and we're celebrating, or whether I am just out for the count. There's something about food that God uses through every section of the Bible to just calm. Food, having a meal, is one of the primary ways that God goes about restoring things, resituating things. And so it's no different here. When the enemies are around David, what does he have this comfort in? God set this table for him, this lavish dinner. And then he says, at this table, you anoint my head with oil. Well, in ancient times, what's happening here is here. If you remember the story of Jesus at the table with the Pharisees and the rich people, and this woman comes in and she dumps this thing of oil and she starts rubbing it around on his head. What is she doing? She's acknowledging the presence of somebody important. And so anointing someone's head with oil in the scriptures is God's way of saying, hey, I see you, and I have specifically am looking at you. You're important. You're cared for. And so what people would do is if they had a guest come over, they would anoint their heads with oil and to recognize, hey, you're important here. You're cared about here. I see you. And so at this table where God sits with David, David's head's anointed, reminded that he's cared for. And what happens? His cup overflows. Right? In the presence of his enemies, when people are stalking and just trying to rip life apart from him, in a time where his cup should be empty, in a time where our cups are just, man, life is kicking me everywhere, in a time that our cup should be so empty, in the presence of God, somehow it overflows. And the psalm ends with this statement, surely, because God is all of these things to me, surely goodness and his love follow me. How many times have we been in a spot where we're just like, God has abandoned me, he's gone. Somebody hit the SOS button because we have to do something here. When we spend time with God, in the truest sense, when our eyes can lock with him and we can sit down no matter what's happening, that something will lead us to say, after we've been with him, surely God cares, and he loves me, and he's good. And so I must dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And so that's what's happening here as David is acknowledging, hey, no matter where we're at, what happens is that when I'm with God, not focusing on the way of life, not focusing on all the things that God's asked of me, but God. Because it's interesting, right? When you read this for what it is, and we view it in terms of religion, who's doing majority of the work here? It's God. God's doing the brunt work. He's the one who's leading. He's the one who's preparing. He's the one who's guiding. He's the one who's anointing. He's the one who's preparing the food. So when it comes to religion, when it comes to the God that we believe in and the God that we serve and the God that we do life with, where in the world is it about this, do all these X, Y, and Z things just so that you can get at the table with me? You see, David didn't have to do anything to get to the table. God did absolutely everything for him and validated David in the process. I care about you, so come on, sit. And notice another thing here is that David at this table isn't sitting down and going, all right, God, here is what I need. So we've got point number 1, I need you to crush my enemies. And God's like, yes, vanquish enemies, check. Okay, next thing I need is I need you to, no. David's not at the table sitting here making all the plans of like, I need you to fix this and I need you to heal. And how often does that become our relationship with God? Right? God, I need you to fix this right now, or I need you to heal this, or I need you to do this. And then it just becomes that God's this genie, and he's supposed to give every amount of desire to our lives just to make it absolutely better. And we miss the entire purpose. That it's God, not what he does, not what we do. It's just us and God. That's the relationship of the scriptures. That's the life that God is beckoning humanity into, is just being with him. And so we get into this spot where David's focus is just simply God. And it's not about fixing. There's something interesting here. That when David's at this table and how he describes this imagery of him and God, it's just the world just kind of slips away. It's like David's so focused on God that everything else just kind of takes a back seat. And so we're able to walk through, even when we step back out into the chaos doesn't faze us anymore. Is because there's something different. There's something powerful about just being with God that can flip absolutely everything. And so I think that's the issue. I think the issue lies here, is that our relationship with God becomes about, how are you going to fix this? How are you going to give me what I need? Because we as humans, we do this thing where we operate, where it's like we want to maximize joy and minimize pain, right? That's all of our lives. We want to maximize joy, and we want to do our best to minimize as much pain and as much suffering as we can get out of the picture. But God doesn't fix things. He doesn't fix things in the way that we want them to be. So it's like this. When we approach the table in this sense, and we're like, God, I need you to fix things. I need you to do anything. It's like when you start praying for something, and it's like, man, I need you to do this. I need you to do this. And then we get into this spot where, if you've been following God for any amount of time, this sometimes happens, where you pray for this, and you're really, really praying for it, and then some time passes, and then some more time passes. And then we just throw our hands up, and it's just like, well, to heck with it. God's not going to do this. And so what's going to happen? What do? We take the reins back, and we're just like, all right, I'm going to maximize joy as much as possible, and I'm going to do as much damage control as I possibly can. And so when we approach the table, it's all about, we've got an agenda. We need to get things going, God. We need to get things going. And so we hop back into control mode. And when we hop back into control mode, what's that actually saying about our faith? Is that, God, I'm only going to be a Christian when it's convenient for me. I'm only going to be a Christian when it adds up with how I want things to go in my timetable. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine what that does to a relationship? Can you imagine going into a marriage like that? I'm only going to be a husband or a wife when it's convenient for me. That I love you. I made this covenant and this commitment to you, but I'm only going to do that when it works out in my benefit. Or a father or a mother or an employee or a boss, that I'm going to live life in these relationships only when it's convenient for me. And do you know what stinks is that I know some of us in this room know exactly what that relationship's like. And that's no way to live. But in our brains, when we see those things happening, it's like, how dare you? How dare you think that a relationship can work like that? How dare you think that you can just show up when it's best for you? Right? Did you not make the statement of love? Did you not make the commitment to honor this relationship? And in our minds, we understand how unjust that actually is. But then, why do we treat God sometimes the way of that? You see, when we hop into control mode, it's not acknowledging God for who he is. It's saying that, God, you're not producing on my agenda. So henceforth, I'm only viewing you in the ways that is what's beneficial for me. And if not, I'm good. That's no relationship at all. But you see a God all throughout the scriptures who is faithful and committed to his people, has never failed them, has never left them. He's the perfect father, the perfect companion, the perfect friend. And he models what exactly a perfect relationship should be. And so I want to close as we talk about this, is that the need for control comes through trust. If I want control of my life, then I'm stating that I don't trust that God is actually capable at leading my life or guiding or giving or whatever that might be. But I think it's a little bit deeper than that. Because saying the statement, I don't trust God, or I don't think I can trust God, is just fluff. That is a bull answer. That is a bull statement. I think the truth of it is that we don't want to trust God. Because what has God done to ever prove that we can't trust him or don't trust him? Sure, he might not operate in the circumstances that we want, but when has God truly in our lives ever done anything that we can't trust that he is working for good, and he is working for life, and he is working for the goal of growth and the betterment of us as spiritual beings? And so control actually comes into the spot of, I don't want to trust God. Because when I'm controlling, I have the power. I'm calling the shots. I'm in charge. And so when we look at our overarching statement, when you love Jesus but you still need control, it turns into really this. When you love Jesus, you will want to trust him. When you love Jesus, you will want to trust him. You see, Jesus does this thing when he meets a person and he opens their eyes to what life truly is. And he's going to say something like, hey, I want you to follow me, not so that you can just be a good person, not so you can just follow these things so that your life might, in the presence of others, be morally good, because religion is just chasing after being a good person. That's all it is. It's just being morally acceptable, right? That person's kind, so they treat people with kindness, or they give this amount of money, or they're invested in X amount of things. And Jesus is saying, no, I want to move you past just being morally good. I want to transcend the very depths of who you are. And I love it because Paul and Peter are going to say these statements of when you become a Christian, you're not just following a guy for some good things in life. You become a completely different kind of human being. Jesus isn't just out to make us good boys and girls. He's out to make us new humans. Spiritual humans that operate solely out of a relationship with God. It's crazy. It's crazy what we have let religion do. If we're going to be a church, a true Christian, Christ-following church, man, it is way past just being good. It's about being godly and holy. And that's not based off of what we do. That's based on who calls us and who tells us who we are. That's what we just got done talking about. It comes with having a relationship with a God who wants to be invested in even the tiniest ounces of controlling aspects in our life. To show us, you can trust me. I'm going to make you lie down in green pastures sometimes. I'm going to lead you beside still waters. I'm going to add peace. I have everything that you need so that when you're walking through chaos, you won't fight this urge to take the reins back. That's why I love when Jesus says you cannot serve two masters, because you're going to love one and you're going to hate the other. And almost 10 times out of 10, we're going to choose ourselves because we can get things done and it's easy and we know what we like. But waiting and trusting God is unknown. It takes time, but it's going to be far better for our lives and the people around us. And so if you still need control, man, we got to pray. We got to pray that God would instill this desire, not just so that we can trust him, but that God would teach us so that we would want to trust him. That's how our world's going to change. That's how people's lives change when they recognize that God is a God of love and goodness. Not just a person with a clipboard saying, you didn't do all these things. So let's do that. Let's pray right now. God, thank you.